Muy buenos días a todos. Es un gusto saber que nos están acompañando en la segunda sesión de este programa inspiracional orientado hacia la acción, que en el Grupo Bancolombia hemos llamado Generación Consciente. Se trata de convertir entre todos a este grupo de empresas en un motor de transformación positiva para las sociedades en los distintos países en los que estamos. Mi nombre es Jorge Espinosa y uno de los realizadores del Guapo, el podcast en español de The Washington Post. Yo soy periodista y después de la primera sesión que tuvimos la semana pasada, el resumen, esto es muy importante, lo pueden encontrar en los documentos disponibles en la landing page por la que se conectaron a este evento. Quiero una vez más, como hicimos la semana pasada en la primera sesión, reiterar lo felices que estamos por poder acompañarlos durante las 7 jornadas que nos quedan. La idea hoy, ¿cuál es? Es que de este momento en adelante, hasta el final de nuestros encuentros, ustedes puedan ir construyendo de la mano de Raj Sisodia y de Neha Sangwan y de su gran equipo de facilitadores un legado que se constituirá en el compromiso de transformación que ustedes como líderes van a asumir en sus organizaciones. Ahora, estas instrucciones que vienen a continuación son importantes porque son recomendaciones técnicas que facilitarán la experiencia en Teams. En primer lugar, recuerden usar la app de Teams que tienen instalada en sus equipos porque la versión web no tiene todas las opciones de trabajo colaborativo, que va a ser muy importante. En segundo lugar, es importante que usen audífonos como los que tengo acá o de casco, porque esa es la mejor manera de evitar el doble registro de sonido cuando estemos conversando en grupo, lo que va a ocurrir más adelante. Recuerden que durante este evento en vivo pueden escribirnos usando la opción de Q&A o preguntas y respuestas y el personal de producción va a estar muy pendiente de recoger sus comentarios. A sus correos ha llegado hoy un mensaje con el vínculo muy importante a su breakout room. Haciendo clic en él se pueden desplazar directamente al salón de trabajo donde los estará esperando su facilitador. También vamos a compartir estos vínculos, los vínculos para los breakout rooms, a través del área de preguntas y respuestas. Pero es muy importante que estén atentos al encabezado donde se indica a qué grupo pertenece cada link, para que no terminen en equipos distintos. Y finalmente, aunque la mayoría de nosotros habla en español, gran parte del evento será en inglés. Por eso hemos habilitado la app Interactio para la traducción simultánea. Usarla es muy sencillo. Descargan la aplicación en la tienda del smartphone que tengan, la abren e introducen un código que es el siguiente: G de generación, C consciente 2020, GC 2020. Presionan play y ahí podrán oír la traducción de la experiencia a través del dispositivo móvil. Si usted está en alguna de las breakout rooms que necesita una traducción, algunos de los facilitadores hablan español, algunos no, deslicen hacia la izquierda y van a encontrar la opción. Hoy, durante la jornada, vamos a hablar sobre escuchar, sobre el oído, uno de los sentidos más importantes que tiene que desarrollar un líder y que en general es un activo para la vida. Escuchemos entonces primero al presidente del Grupo Bancolombia, que como siempre quiere saludarlos. Juan Carlos, muy buenos días, ¿qué tal estás?
Hola Jorge, buenos días, muchas gracias, muy buenos días para todos. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos en esta segunda sesión, que promete ser una sesión que nos ayude a reflexionar, a incorporar nuevos conceptos de la mano de Raj, que ya los vieron en la primera sesión, y todo su equipo, que es extraordinario y que hemos puesto a disposición de ustedes para que avancemos en este camino de poder realmente crear una generación consciente. Así que yo espero que sea una jornada muy provechosa. Interactúen, por favor, a través del chat, los comentarios, y espero que podamos seguir avanzando en esta sesión. Nuevamente, muchas gracias por acompañarnos y esperamos que sea un evento muy productivo para todos.
Gracias, Juan Carlos. Como vimos a grandes rasgos la semana pasada en la primera sesión, es indispensable que las empresas definan un propósito. De eso, de alguna manera, habló Raj la semana pasada, y que ese propósito sea el referente principal de la toma de decisiones en la empresa. Es muy importante que ese propósito, además, esté en armonía con los propósitos personales de quienes integran las empresas. Las empresas son, en el fondo, personas. Sobre esto será la exposición de hoy de Raj Sisodia, el coautor del bestseller Conscious Capitalism, cofundador y codirector de Conscious Capitalism Inc. y autor de más de 11 libros y 100 artículos académicos que han aparecido en publicaciones financieras y de negocios muy prestigiosas. Raj va a comenzar repasando brevemente los principales hallazgos de la jornada anterior y después desarrollará su presentación. Raj, good morning. How are you? The time is yours. How is Boston? How is everything?
Good morning. Good morning. Great to see you and great to see everybody else. Happy to be back with you. Tomorrow is Thanksgiving here in the United States, and it's really one of the most beautiful holidays for us to step back and really feel gratitude for everything that we are blessed with. And even though it's been an extremely challenging year from every respect, we still have a lot to be grateful for, of course. And I am in this moment particularly grateful to Grupo Bancolombia, to Juan Carlos, to the entire team that has helped put this experience together. And mostly to all of you, the people attending this, giving a commitment of your time, but also your heart and your energy towards creating a better world, because we know we cannot do that without the active participation and leadership of business. So I'm really excited and energized at what 2021 will bring, because the expression is it's always darkest before the dawn. And I think we've been through some dark times here, but I do feel that from this will come an even brighter future than might have otherwise emerged. So again, really happy to be on this very meaningful journey with all of you. Last week we had a number of interesting observations that people made. You heard about them a little bit, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things.
Okay.
Is that if you look at the sort of a pure form of capitalism or aggressive form or sort of laissez-faire capitalism, it's practiced in Chile more than any other country in the region, and you can see now the effect and the backlash that is having, right? When you don't bring in some of the elements that we're talking about, the kind of a social revolution almost. And so we need to recognize that as an early warning signal in a way that there is something. Obviously, capitalism has tremendous power and potential and beauty in it, but we have to do it with higher consciousness, as we're talking about in this mode. And when we start doing that, we're going to get out of this sort of sense of survival and sort of a sinking feeling that many countries are in. It can bring hope and a sense of possibility for the future when business starts to speak in this way and take on its role. And the other key aspect of that to remember always is that these ideas we're talking about, they appeal to all human beings and all of us on this program. But if you think about the impact on younger people, millennials, and the generations that followed, those are some of the most purpose-driven generations we've ever had. And so if you want to speak to the next generation, if you want to speak to our children, many of us are in family businesses, the next generation of people coming into those businesses do not resonate with the traditional stories. So these ideas are even more important to bridge the generational gaps that sometimes we can find. So I think this is going to be an important experience from that standpoint as well. And I think the last point that was made in Susan's group that we want to move from PowerPoint to Power People, right? We want to figure out how to actually make this happen, but we still are going to start with the PowerPoint today. And of course, over time, we're going to talk about how we're going to implement all of these ideas. So I'm going to now share my presentation. And so the topic today is on personal purpose. You cannot have a conscious business without a conscious leader. And you cannot be a conscious leader unless you're a conscious human being. And you cannot be a conscious human being until you actually understand who you are, what makes you tick, what is your unique role to play in this life. So it really does start here, in a way, with asking some fundamental questions about oneself. So the title I'm using is Awaken, The Path to Purpose, Inner Peace, and Healing, which also happens to be the working title of my next book. And it kind of summarizes everything I've learned in my 62 years about these subjects. Mark Twain famously asked the question, what is the most important day of your life? And if you think about it, probably the day you were born, right? Most people would say is the most important day. But then he asks, what is the second most important day? And here people might give different answers, the day I had my first child or the day I got married. But he says, really, the second most important day is the day that you finally understand why you were born, right? That begins now the next stage of your journey and your true calling in this life, right? When you figure out what it's about. And this idea of purpose in life is something that there's a great hunger in the world for. Right? People want to think about what is beyond just the material, right? Just having a job and having a house and buying all these things. And if you look at the best-selling book in the last 40, 50 years, and one of the best-selling books in history, really, is Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life, asking the question, what on earth am I here for, right? So again, there's a deep hunger for meaning and purpose that is within all of us. And the book that for me was a life-changing book on this subject, which I only discovered it when I was about 50 years old. And I wish I had discovered it much earlier. And maybe some of you have read this book. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And this was written by Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist in Vienna, Austria in the 1940s, and had been very successful treating people who were depressed and suicidal. And he was not using the traditional, medicines and electroshock therapy and other things that people were using. He was connecting people to a deeper sense of meaning and purpose in their life. So even though you had Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud at the same time practicing what he called depth psychology, he was talking about height psychology. And he discovered a fundamental truth that happiness, which all human beings want, we all want to be happy and fulfilled. He said happiness cannot be pursued. In the U.S. Declaration of Independence, he said we are all have the right, the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But he said, no, actually, that's a false promise. You cannot pursue happiness. You cannot run after happiness because all you will do is seek out pleasures, right? Have fun. But then you will be left empty. So he said happiness cannot be pursued. Happiness is something that ensues. It is the outcome of living a life of meaning and purpose. That is true happiness. That is deep happiness. And where does that come from? It comes from three things: doing work that matters, making a difference in the lives of others, not just working to support ourselves or to benefit ourselves, but the deepest human satisfaction comes from doing work that makes a difference in other people's life. The second is loving without condition. Human beings have a need to care. We are wired to care. And if we don't have that in our life, then we will never really be happy, truly happy, right? So loving without condition, not loving conditionally, saying if you do this, then I will love you. No, loving without condition. And then finally, finding meaning in your suffering. We cannot control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond to it. And depending on how we respond to it, we can actually find deeper meaning. There's an equation you can write: despair equals suffering minus meaning. Right? If you suffer, then you will have some despair. But if you find some meaning, then the despair goes down. If you find more meaning, the despair, sense of hopelessness, can disappear. If you find even more meaning, the despair can turn into the opposite: hope, right, and joy. And that's really the core lesson. And he had to test his ideas in the crucible of the Holocaust, because the Germans invaded Austria in the 1940s, of course, and he and his entire family were taken away to concentration camps. And he had completed a manuscript for a book, and he took it with him thinking that he just needs to edit it and they will send it to the publisher. And of course, they stripped him naked and they burned his manuscript, the first thing they did. And then for the next 38 months, he survived in those concentration camps where 97% of the people died. But he survived because he had a reason to live. He said, no, I need to survive because I can help millions with these ideas. I have a reason why I need to get through this. And he helped other people do that as well. And in that book, he came out, and of course, he went back to Vienna. He found his wife, his pregnant wife with the unborn child. They were dead. His mother, father, brother, sister, everybody had died. He was left alone. And again, he was plunged into despair. Again, he lifted himself up. He said, no, I need to do this work. In 3 weeks, he wrote this book. And of course, it has changed the world. He's written about 35, 40 books. He got 40 honorary doctorates. Millions of people have been benefited by his insights. So those are important for us at a personal level. But even if you think about from a business standpoint, you could change the name of that book to The Corporation's Search for Meaning, and the exact same lessons apply. Companies pursue profits the way humans pursue happiness, but profits cannot be pursued. The more you directly pursue profit, the more you will do things like squeezing your employees, squeezing your suppliers, externalizing burdens onto society, short-term kinds of actions that will ultimately hurt your ability. So profits ensue. They are the outcome of the same things, working towards a higher purpose. Right? Just like we need meaning and purpose in our individual lives, our businesses need to have their own higher purpose. And the business needs to be built on love and care, right? Not on just self-interest of the business, which is to maximize profits, and to grow from adversity. Tough times like the economic crisis or like what we've been through in the last year, these are an opportunity really for us to deepen our true values, understand who we really are, recommit to those things. And as I mentioned earlier, millennials are the most meaning and purpose-driven generation ever. So this hunger for meaning and purpose, which used to happen more for our generation, I would say, around midlife, right? There's the idea of the midlife crisis around 38 to 42. Many people go through some kind of existential crisis. They say, oh my God, half my life is over, and what am I really living for? I thought it was all about the house and the car and the salary and the corner office, but I have all that and I feel empty. And people start volunteering for causes and they start setting up foundations or nonprofits. You know, they devote their energy to things that really mean something to them. Now we're finding this is happening at a younger age, even as teenagers. Many of our children and grandchildren are actually highly motivated by meaning and purpose. As around 85 to 90%. I know of that generation really care about these things. So again, from a business standpoint, if we don't have a business that is built on a foundation of meaning and purpose and values and care, then we will have a very tough time attracting, and even more than that, society could find that because young people don't believe in free markets and business because of the way they've experienced it, that we could actually end up with some kind of revolutions. Now, Joseph Jaworski is another one of my heroes, and I've had the honor to meet him. He's written a book called Synchronicity, which is an incredible book. And he says, if you reach deeply into yourself, you are reaching into the very essence of mankind. What do we mean by that? That which is deeply personal is also completely universal. And so what I would like to share now, with your permission, is a little bit of my personal journey, because I do feel that there's universal value and lessons that can be learned from any of our journeys. I mean, Juan Carlos could be talking, any of us could be talking, and when we go really deep enough, we find universal lessons from each of us. And in your documents, in your resource guides and so forth, we have material about how you can start to think about your personal purpose, right? And I'm going to just share my journey about how that has happened. You know, what's the impact that the world needs to happen? What am I good at? And what do I care about? What lights me up? What touches me in my heart, right? Somewhere in there is our purpose. So let me just share my journey. And I've had a rather unusual upbringing, I would say, compared to most people that I know, in the sense that I've lived, quite a few places. I was born in India in 1958, and then in 1965, my father had gone to Canada to get his PhD in agriculture science. He came back to India, but meanwhile he got a job in Barbados working on sugarcane research. So in 1965, at the age of 7, I was suddenly lifted from like a small village, small town in India, to London and then to Barbados, and wow, life was suddenly very, very different and exciting. We lived there for 2 years, and then we moved to Salinas, California, where he got a job working on wheat research, which became his passion for the rest of his career. 2 years there, but he was a restless person. You know, in 1969, they decided to move to Canada and back to University of Manitoba, where he got his PhD. And then they said, you know, our children are growing up outside our culture. We need to go back. India needs, you know, this agriculture revolution, green revolution was happening in India in those days, to feed all the people in India. So my father decided to go back to India around that time. So at the age of 12, I'm back in India suddenly, right? And in a very, very different experience. And there I finished my schooling, my college, my master's, and then eventually ended up coming back to the US in 1981 to get my PhD in business. So I've kind of gone back and forth, right? It's kind of like full circle multiple times, India, the West, back to India, back to the West. So I've kind of developed a simultaneous outsider-insider lens of looking at things. So just to tell you a little bit about my family, so these are my parents, my mother Usha, my dad Narayan. Usha was a very simple, very loving, somewhat innocent human being. My father was very brilliant. He won gold medals everywhere, bachelor's, master's. He got his PhD. You know, he's quite a brilliant scientist, right? And of course, they had an arranged marriage. They never met each other. All they saw was like a half-inch by half-inch photograph. I think my father saw. That's how things were in those days, right? And then, of course, my father was away getting his education. So I was born in 58. So this is me probably at about a year old, right? And this is me with my grandfather when my sister was born. Now, my grandfather, I come from this very, very feudal system. You know, India has a caste system. You have the Brahmins, the priestly class, then you have the warrior class, which is I'm part of, and then you have the business people, the traders, and then you have the people who are doing the menial work, the cleaning and all of those kinds of things. So the four castes, and I'm from that warrior caste. So this was a very, very feudal, hyper-masculine, and I would say even misogynistic culture, right? Women did not have women kept their faces covered, they're sitting on the ground, my grandfather would yell at them. It was a very dominating, there was lots of abuse of the workers. There was all kinds of abuse, right? I mean, there was tremendous traumatic things that went on there. So that was the environment into which I was born, but I was born much more like my mother. And because my father was away getting his bachelor's, master's, and PhD, I didn't know my father until I was 7 years old, right? And my mother pretty much brought me up. He went away to Canada for almost 5 years, so I didn't know him. So I was brought up by my mother, very simple, loving, sweet, innocent person. But I was embedded in this system, which was the opposite of that. And I did not have the influence of my father, who was more like my grandfather. He was tough, right? He was a patriarch. So again, this is us without my father, who's away in Canada, with my sister now. And now we moved to Barbados, right? And we have a house near the beach, and suddenly life is very different, as you can imagine. And then from there, as I said, we moved to California and Canada, and then we came back to India. And there I finished my high school, and then I went to engineering, because in those days you had very few options, If you were good in math and science, you pretty much tried to go to engineering. If you're good in biology and science, you went to try to become a doctor. And if you weren't good in both of those things, then you get a Bachelor of Arts, and God help you, maybe you get a government job, There were very few options. India was kind of a socialist democracy in those days. Government controlled every aspect of the economy. The marginal income tax rate was 97.5%, the highest rate, right? And there were controls on production. You had to wait 7 years to get a scooter. You had to wait, it was a 4-year waiting list to buy a car. It was a 12-year waiting list to get a telephone. It was a dead economy, very few options. So anyway, I went to engineering. Nobody asked me, what is your passion? What is your real thing that lights you? I really enjoyed writing. I would have wanted to be a journalist, but that was not an option, right? So I became an electrical and electronics engineer. And then I found out I was working in a factory in Bombay. I found out if you get an MBA, your salary would be double, and you would work in an air-conditioned office instead of in a hot factory. So, of course, I said, that sounds good to me. I went and I got into a business school in Bombay, and that's me during those 2 years. And, of course, at the end of that, I had a job with 2.5 times the salary, right? I thought that was my path. And then I come down for breakfast one day, and a group of my friends are dressed up and going somewhere. And I said, where are you going? We don't have any classes today. They said, we're going to the US Information Agency to get GMAT applications. And I said, why do you need that? We are already getting our PhD. Our MBA. I said, no, we want to apply for a PhD in business. I said, I didn't know you can get a PhD in business. I said, give me 5 minutes, I will change and I will come with you. And the irony is that from the group of about 8 of us, I'm the only one who came to the US to get a PhD in business. I got a full scholarship at Michigan and Cornell, and I ended up going to Columbia and got a PhD in marketing because I didn't like finance. So therefore I chose marketing, right? So again, you can see my decision-making was purely opportunistic in terms of what is available in the moment, right? I was no passion really for engineering. I didn't really have a passion for marketing. I didn't have a dream to become a marketing professor, but here I am in the PhD program in New York, right, in 1981 to 84. And then I started teaching in 1985. And I had a real deep skepticism about what I was being taught. The story of business did not appeal to me at a human level. And marketing, I just felt that marketing was something that it was so aggressive and so much spending on marketing, ads and coupons and junk mail in your mailbox every day. And, I said, this is crazy. How much money are we spending and what are we getting? So my research became about marketing, what's working, what's not working, marketing ethics, marketing productivity, efficiency, effectiveness. And all my research showed that it's pretty bad. We're spending more year after year and we're getting worse outcomes. So I was pretty frustrated and unhappy with marketing. And I almost had a sense of shame about it. I had this inner dialogue that my father got a PhD in agriculture science to feed the world, right, to cure world hunger. And I got a PhD in marketing so I can sell you some more potato chips. Right? Think about that. So I had this deep sense of shame almost. I did not feel that I had a higher purpose in my life. I was embarrassed to tell people I'm a professor of marketing. And then everything changed around 2005. I started a new book project. I was searching for a better way. And I think I talked a little bit about this last time, right? And I was writing a book that eventually became Firms of Endearment, and the distinct moment in June of 2005, when I was writing the stories of some of these companies which have all the principles of conscious capitalism in them. That's how we discovered them. I found myself with tears in my eyes. And I said to David, sitting across the dining table, my co-author, I said, David, I think my purpose just found me. I think I figured out what I want to do the rest of my life. When your body tells you something. I said, I've never had tears of joy connected to my work. And think about it. If you have tears of joy, that means your body is telling. That's why learning to listen is so critical, right? Listening to yourself and then listening to the right people out there who can guide us, right? And so at that writing retreat, pretty much my purpose found me. And as Joseph Campbell said, you follow your bliss and you follow your heartbreak. I had been following my heartbreak until from 85 to 2005, so 20 years. I was kind of unhappy and unfulfilled in my work, and I was pointing out all the things that were wrong with marketing. I did a book called Does Marketing Need Reform? I did all kinds of research criticizing marketing, right? But I was stuck in a very negative space. And also business, I didn't resonate with the story of business. And now I found the bliss, I found the other side of this, right? And so that was kind of the discovery of my purpose. This is when the book came out in 2007, and my work life completely transformed, right? That's how I met John Mackey. That's how we started Conscious Capitalism. So again, from a career standpoint, my life dramatically changed. And of course, that led to the launching of the Conscious Capitalism movement in 2008. This was a flyer for our first conference. And that's been an incredible journey on the work side. But on the personal side, I still had many, many challenges. I had found my purpose in my work life, but I had hidden a lot of suffering under the carpet. I was pretending it didn't really matter. I was pouring myself into my work, right? Constantly working, constantly traveling, because I felt, we have a sense of urgency and we need to do this. And so that continued, I would say, for the next 10 years in many ways. I really did not look inward, right? Beyond the fact that this is what my work is, right? And then 2018 came around. And it was a pretty important year in the sense that I was turning 60 that year. And that's a major milestone, right? I mean, if 40 is midlife, then what is 60? It's kind of a 3/4 point, right? And you say, wow, this is what does it mean? And looking back and then looking ahead, how should I be thinking about things? But of course, I was already working on the healing organization and I was busy, so I didn't really have much time for contemplation. I had a book deadline for October of that year. I was doing my research, doing my interviews, and also traveling and speaking like I always did. And then 3 people told me, 3 women who I trust, told me, please, Raj, you need to slow down. You're constantly running. You never are with yourself. You're always from project to project, airport to airport. You need to slow down. If you're going to write about healing, you need to work on your own healing. Because you cannot write about healing in a meaningful way. It will just be an intellectual exercise from your head. You need to experience your own healing. You need to slow down and be with yourself and look inward and see, what's inside you. And of course, my initial reaction was, no, I don't have time. I have a deadline. So no, book deadlines can be changed, right? So fortunately, I listened to them and I decided to delay the book by 5 months. And then I said yes to a bunch of experiences. So one of them was going to the Himalayas when I turned 60 with this group, Shakti, sort of spiritual journey. I wrote a book about the feminine and masculine, and my co-author Nilima was organizing a trip up in the region of the border of India with Tibet, in the high Himalayas. We were literally at 20,000 feet plus. And this is a deeply Buddhist part of the world. Right? And if you want to talk about healing and suffering, of course, Buddhism is where we need to learn a lot of that from, right? So that journey was very, very impactful. I also went on a silent retreat. I'll talk about each of these briefly. And spending 4 days with my, in complete silence. You just receive so much wisdom from within. And then I actually went to the Ecuador rainforest with a group called the Pachamama Alliance, and that turned out to be a life-changing experience. And I worked with a coach for the first time as well. So all of this happened, you can imagine, within a period of 5 months that I did all this. And I just had tremendous growth and learning as a result of that. So this was us in our Himalayan journey. As you can see, this is right on this lake actually is half in China, half in India. We're on the India side. And the Buddhist wisdom about suffering, is about bearing witness to the suffering of others. And from that, loving action will naturally arise, right? So those kinds of learnings about how do we think about life and how do we think about suffering. The silent retreat, where again I received so much insight and wisdom just coming to me, right? If we are quiet, we get connected to the source and we can then actually absorb. Otherwise, we are so distracted all the time, right? And then, of course, we went to the rainforest, and this is a 10-day journey. We spend days with two different indigenous people, the Zapara and the Achuar, and we had many different shamanic healing rituals. And one of them that they were offering was an ayahuasca ceremony with a real shaman. You can see the person on the right? And at the end of, and I said, yes, I want to try this. People said this can be life-changing. Ayahuasca is something that connects you to the earth. It's a grandmother or mother energy, right? And they said, one of the lessons to learn there is that we have, in the modern world, become disconnected from nature. That we say, that we come into this world. We don't come into this world. We come out of this world, right? And we are as much part of nature as a tree is, or this parrot is, or that sloth that I'm holding, right? And yet we separate ourselves completely. And we end up using and abusing nature, and we end up hurting ourselves. So part of it was the wisdom. I said, the shaman would say, in the modern world, you all connect with each other up here from the head, right? Purely from the head. And we need to connect from the body, from the spirit, right? From the neck down. We connect with each other. We connect with all living things, trees and animals, and we even connect with stones and rocks and mountains. There's a spirit to everything. So again, it's a very, very different immersive experience, and culminating in that ayahuasca journey, which I had no idea what to expect, and it turned out to be a really, really profound thing. At the end of a long day, when we hiked with the shaman to a sacred waterfall, we had a cleansing ceremony, then we hiked back to his little hut in the settlement. And then they had laid out banana leaves. We took a bath in the river and we changed, and then we had the brew, and he was whistling and chanting and blowing, and we lay down on banana leaves. It was a lunar eclipse night. You could see 6 planets lined up from horizon to horizon. And then I started having these experiences. The first 45 minutes or so, I just cried. I had been emotionally bottled up for decades. I had not been able to cry for anything. People, loved ones had died, terrible tragedies had happened. I just could not express my emotion. And then suddenly the floodgates were opened, and I was able to grieve for all the things that I had not been able to properly grieve for. And then I started getting visions. One of them, I saw this long line of people standing under the hot sun, waiting for hours, right? And the end of the line is a tiny little woman, and she gives them a hug like this. And she's actually a real person. Her name, she's called Amma, which means mother. She's the hugging saint. She's from India, a small village in India. She goes all over the world, and tens of thousands of people line up and wait 8 hours in the sun to get a hug. And she hugs them, and they experience unconditional love, and they walk away in tears. And the message that I got was that all these people standing in this line all day, they could be hugging each other, that they have what they are looking for in each other, that we have what we need to heal ourselves and to heal each other. We can't do it alone. We need to help each other, right? So you don't need to go to another place and another person, that we human beings have that within us. So, and then I started to get a vision, and these 4 words started to float in my vision. And the message was, this is what the world needs to heal. This is what business needs to heal. And the 4 words came as an acronym. I like acronyms, so it actually was love, that we need to operate from love. And we don't in the world of business, right? We don't run businesses primarily to care for each other. We run businesses primarily to take care of our own interests, to use each other, right? So it's coming from, I'm going to meet my self-interest and I'm going to use you so you can meet your self-interest. So we're not, rather than serving each other, we're using each other in business. So we're coming from fear and scarcity rather than love and abundance, right? So we need to be operating from love and permeate that into every part of our life. That's the only way to heal. There are many ways that you can hurt. There's only one way to heal, and that is from love. Innocence. We are all born innocent. Every one of us has unique qualities. I was born very trusting, very idealistic, very peace-loving, harmony, So those are qualities that I had to embrace. But also we are all born innocent. And that's a quality we all need to embrace, re-embrace. Because we're born innocent, but then life takes a hold of us and we become corrupted in a way, right? We start using other people, we start abusing, we start lying, we start doing all kinds of things, cutting corners in order to protect ourselves or rise in the world or whatever it is, right? We start to act not from a place of genuine care and goodwill, but from a place of manipulation, right? All of that. So we need to reclaim our innocence. This is not the innocence of a helpless child. This is the strong innocence of a whole adult human being, right? The innocence on the other side of wholeness. I think we need to go back to a kind of innocence. Simplicity. We have made everything so complicated in our lives, in the world of business, right? If you think about the 2008 financial crisis, very few people understood what those instruments and those derivatives and all the things that we had, right? The mortgage backs, those were all ways of creating unnecessary complexity so people could hide behind that and trick each other in a way. We need to go back. The simplicity on the other side of complexity. As Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr., the Supreme Court Justice, said, I would not give a fig for the simplicity on this side of complexity. I would give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. How do we get to what is really the essence of things, right? When you achieve mastery, you actually get to a kind of simplicity. And the last is truth. We have to have a commitment to the truth. Think about our world of business, our world of politics. To what extent do we speak the truth? In marketing, right? I'm a professor of marketing. How much truth is there? It's all about spin, right? It's all about positioning and putting the best angle, right? So there's not a commitment to that. And that is the most fundamental thing of all, integrity and truth. You know, Mahatma Gandhi's autobiography was called My Experiments with Truth. I'm getting bright sunshine in my face. So this is what came to me, and there are many other things like that, you know. And this is the wisdom that I'm now trying to integrate and write about. And there were other things as well. And I started working with a coach, as I said as well, that year. And I told her the story of my life. I told her about my difficult relationship with my father. I didn't know him until I was 7. And then he's the opposite of me. He wanted to control me completely. His love was very conditional. When I didn't agree to marry somebody that he chose, he cut me off for 5 years. He threatened, you know, all kinds of things, right? And so I never had a close, loving relationship with him. And I was much more like my mother. And everything that came naturally to me, all my qualities of trusting and innocence and harmony and idealism. He would tell me, you need to be the opposite. You cannot trust anybody. Yeah, you should not be idealistic. You should be pragmatic, right? You need to be rough and tough, right? Not seeking harmony. And I was good in school. He said, that doesn't matter. You need to be street smart. So I got this sense that everything that I came with was a defect. Right, that my own qualities were defects. They were not qualities, but they were defects, right? So when I told her about all of this, and she listened to me, and at the end of that, she said, do you realize that for the last 15 years, you have been honoring your mother with your work? That you spent 45 years, I was 60 at that time, right? You spent 45 years trying to impress your father, trying to prove yourself to your father. Your father gets a PhD, you get a PhD, right? You're always trying to succeed in the world and, you know, achieve the titles and the money and all of that. And he was not capable of impressing him or satisfying him because you're not him. I'm the opposite of him, right? So I spent all that time making myself miserable, trying to do things that were not in harmony with who I was. And she said, do you realize that you have now been honoring your mother with your work? That for the last 15 years, what you have brought to the world is really what your mother stands for. And she said, does she know that? I said, well, I did not know that. How would she know that? And she insisted that I call her, right, and tell her that. And it turned out to be an incredibly healing conversation. She had no idea, right? So I'm going from trying to impress my father to honoring my mother and recognizing that bringing that mother energy into the world is what the world really needs. But I'm also now evolving beyond that to say it's not that I need to reject everything that my father stood for. He was a brilliant man. He was very dynamic. You know, he had vision, right? He had courage. He went across the world, you know, in 1960 when he didn't do that. So I need to integrate the both. I need to strive to combine the best of both, right? I need to retain and lead with the love and the compassion and the empathy and inclusiveness of the mother, but also bring in the strength and courage and discipline and focus and brilliance of my father. And beyond that, the phrase that we use and a book I plan to write in the future, we need to become a wise fool of tough love. What does that mean? We need to have simultaneously wisdom, you know, the elder energy, meaning, purpose, legacy, impact on the world, transcendent values, right? We need to retain our foolishness. We need to have the healthy inner child. Joy, playfulness, laughter, creativity comes from having a healthy child inside you, healthy inner child. And that you have to heal your traumas. to do that, because all of us, I have a wounded inner child. Things happened to me when I was young that were very difficult. I'm working on that, right? But once you do that, then you actually can become light-hearted and light-spirited. So you need to be wise and foolish. You need to be tough and loving, right? As Martin Luther King said, tough-minded and tender-hearted. So it's the father energy and the mother energy. So really becoming whole is the ultimate destination, I think, for all of us. In our own way, we can each be a unique wise fool of tough love in our own way, but I think we need to cultivate all 4 dimensions, because that's what it means to be a whole human being. And then 2019 came around and I lost both my parents in the same year within about 3 months of each other. And they were both well, they were in good health, and then something happened and suddenly they were gone, right? And I think back now, and what did they leave me with? My mother's last words to me were, don't bring pain to anyone's heart. Live your life in a way that you don't cause other people pain in their heart. And that's a message that I keep with me and in front of me at all times, you know. And then my last conversation with my father, literally on his bed, he looked at me and I just wanted to thank him. I said, you know, despite all our differences, I thank you for giving us an incredible life and working hard for us. I didn't want him to have any kind of guilt or any kind of regret as he is in his last days about life, because everything that happened, you know, I think ultimately was good. I learned from it. And his last words to me were, Raj, you are your own boss. Now, that could mean that you never listen to me and you don't listen to anybody and you only do your own thing. I chose it to say, you know what, none of us needs a boss. We need leaders. We need coaches. We need mentors. We need guides. We don't need a boss. We don't need anybody bossing us around, telling us what to do. We all need to be our own. We need to be leading ourselves, right? Become the best possible leader that we can be. The most important person you lead is yourself. And so that's what the journey I'm exploring now in this new book is. How do we become the best possible leader for ourselves? And what is the path to that? And the tentative title, as I said, is Awaken, the path to inner peace, purpose, and healing. And I've come up with 10 steps, and I'm not really going to go into these, but they're pretty self-evident. You have to start by knowing yourself. Who are you? What's your essence? What are your real qualities? As I told you, trusting, idealistic, peace-loving, etc. And then you have to love yourself. For me, to the extent I knew myself, I actually kind of hated myself because of the messaging I got from my father, that these are defects. And ultimately I came around to say, no, these are my strengths. I have to build on these, right? I have to, once I do that, then I can be myself. I can live. I don't have to act. I don't have to put on a mask and armor and go and try to be somebody who I was not. I was doing that for decades and I was completely miserable in every way. So you have to know yourself, love yourself, be yourself. And of course you have to heal yourself. You have to look at what I did 2 years ago and started that journey. How do we start to heal ourselves and those wounds? How do we get access to that and change that? And then choose your life. Everything that happened with me in my childhood, with my father, all kinds of things, incredibly painful things that I would not wish upon my worst enemy. I would now say I choose those things, right? Because if I choose them, then they can serve me. If I don't, if I remain a victim of them, then they will never be able to serve me. I say, you know what, everything that happened, I experienced the worst of the hyper-masculine, misogynistic patriarchy when I was a child. That's why 50 years later, I wrote a book about the feminine. I had to experience that in order to be able to have the insights, to be able to do the work that I am called to do, right? We have to continually grow and evolve, have a growth mindset, constantly be learning and deepening ourselves, live with an attitude of gratitude and joy, which is what underlies a sense of happiness. We have to, of course, be fully present at all times, not thinking about worrying about the future or dwelling in the past, regretting the past. And then one of the other things I learned from the native people in Ecuador, we have to dream the future. They were very dream-based cultures. They said the world is as you dream it. Now, if you look around you where you are sitting, everything you see existed in somebody's head before it existed on a physical plane, right? So everything that exists is something that started with a human dream other than nature. So if you don't like what we're seeing in the world, we need to dream a better dream, a more beautiful dream. Dream a dream about the more beautiful world we know is possible. And then, of course, we have to work every day to fulfill that dream. Right? Dreaming is not enough. So these are kind of the lessons that I've distilled. This book will be a little bit of memoir, a little bit of like a manual, just based on my learning. And again, to reiterate how I express my purpose, to bring heart, healing, and soul to business and leadership so that we can build a better world that works for everybody. Okay. I'm going to stop here and Stop sharing.
Okay. Thank you so much, Raj. It's very inspiring and touching. And by the way, I know you would have been a great journalist because you're a good human being. So it's a really pleasure to hear you. Contamos ahora con Raj para responder en los próximos 6 minutos algunas de las preguntas que ustedes nos han formulado a través de la opción Q&A. Y es importante que sepan que las que no alcancemos a responder, las que no pueda responder Raj, lo podrá hacer luego en nuestra puesta en común, que es una media hora extra que vamos a tener para los que quieran quedarse y puedan quedarse entre las 12:30 y 1 de la tarde. La primera pregunta, the first question, Raj, on a personal and organizational level, how do you know what the purpose is? It is only one fixed in life. If you focus on a single purpose, are you not stopping exploring other paths? And in case it is something very difficult or idealistic, for example, saving the environment, it could become a great psychological burden, right?
Yeah. So I think the purpose evolves as we evolve and grow in our lifetime. We could be one of the fortunate people who actually fulfill our purpose, right? And then we need to think about something else. I'll talk next week about Microsoft, a company that actually fulfilled its purpose that Bill Gates laid out. But even for us as individuals, I have friends who have had a particular chapter of their life, right? And they had a passion and a purpose, and they did that, and then they were growing. We are growing and evolving, and then they wanted to play on a different stage and try something completely different. So, life is full of adventures. And Joseph Campbell talked about the hero's journey, right? And we go on not just one, but multiple journeys, hero's journeys in our life, where suddenly now the world we're in and the status quo starts to feel unsatisfying, right? And then we go on an adventure and we meet our guides and we experience some kind of trauma and challenges we have to overcome, and ultimately we distill that into the new wisdom that we have. So this is, again, something that can evolve. It can change quite dramatically as well. And I think there can be dimensions to a purpose, right? So you can have a purpose in which the part of it is in your personal life, with your family, etc., and then part of it is in your work life. What we're saying is that it's ideal if those two can come together, right? If we can be integrated human beings, right, where there's alignment between every aspect, personal and work, it's all part of the same whole picture. That is the ideal, right? It doesn't all. And I think if you set a really heroic purpose, like you said about the environment, purposes should be heroic. They should challenge us. They should stretch us, right? And then we do our part of that. And we recognize that none of us goes alone. There are many fellow travelers on every purpose road, right? In conscious capitalism, we have thousands now, right, who share some kind of sense of purpose with what I articulated. So purpose doesn't mean that you're alone on your own road and everybody, there's the 7 billion purposes. No, there are many purposes that align with each other, and you find your tribe, right? And then together, the power of collective action, there's much more courage that we get when we are together with others, and we can dream big. When I had a dream for the Institute for New Capitalism, before I met John Mackey, the CEO of Whole Foods, I mean, that was kind of silly, in a sense. I was a single professor at one university dreaming about changing capitalism, but I had that vision, and when I met John, and he shared that vision, he said, I like the phrase conscious capitalism, same vision. Then we were able to combine and then attract many others, and it became something, right? So again, I think holding true to that and then trusting that you will find your tribe, or your tribe will find you. We are all instruments of something seeking to emerge, right? If we believe in that, there's sort of a path or purpose to evolution, and each of us is playing our role in that. We will get connected with the right people. Once you're starting to think in a certain way, your frequency is resonating at a different level, suddenly you're connected to a whole bunch of different kinds of people, and you will be able to move along in that journey.
Thank you, Raj. I think we have time for one more question. This one is from Michael Saborío from Guatemala. What consequences do you think there could be for a company that do not commit to a higher purpose in terms of a lack of creativity and innovation? I listened to a conference you gave some years ago in Monterrey, in Mexico, and you spoke about the importance of giving people a sense of purpose as a way to promote creativity among the different levels of the organization. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so if you don't have a sense of purpose as a company and sense of core values that you truly believe in and live by, then you're going to have people who come there looking for just a job.
Mhm.
Right? And it might be a career because they're ambitious and they want to climb the corporate ladder, but they will not really be turned on fully. It's like an 8-cylinder engine that's operating on 2 cylinders, right?
Mhm.
Human
Mhm.
beings, most of us just show up, and you can buy our time and you can buy our physical effort, and up to a point, but you cannot buy our creativity, our passion, our commitment. Those are gifts that we choose to give when we are fully lit up by what we're about. So if we want our people to really be able to share the gifts and give what they are capable of, if we don't have such an exciting, inspiring, galvanizing sense of purpose, that will never happen. And in a world where more and more businesses will have that, more and more businesses are seeing this, you simply will not be able to compete in a world. If you're lacking purpose, if you're just about money, it's a hollow and empty pursuit. And other places have people who are passionate and excited, and for them the work is a calling. It's not just a job, it's not a career, it's a calling. I was born to do this. Even if I win the lottery, I will still show up on Monday because the work has meaning beyond the paycheck. I mean, that energy is what runs everything. The creative, caring passion, that is really the differentiator across companies, right? It's not the physical energy, and it's not just the mundane work that we do.